Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video. And yes guys, that's right. You of course read the title of this review video, and with what was clearly teased in the last review video, you of course knew. How could you have not figured it out? Yeah, and especially since, I had done the Mission Impossible review marathon, and it was obvious that I was gonna get around to reviewing this. Well, here we are, and you're watching it. So yes, the final installment of the Mission Impossible film series, where it began all the way back in 1996, and up to this, just, man, what a legacy / impact this film series left off. From it being based off of the TV show and coming straight from Paramount, I tell ya, it's amazing. It's amazing how this film series had come such a long way and ending off on a high note. That's for sure. Yeah. So that's right, guys. I am now finally reviewing the final installment of the Mission Impossible film series, which of course being The Final Reckoning. Yes. The Final Reckoning. Yeah, the first things I have to say about The Final Reckoning, and after watching it, literally, 2 words, and pardon my French, but it's true. After watching this, holy shit. Seriously, wouldn't you occur just like that? Man, I tell ya, this does not disappoint. Like, what happened in the second to last installment, and of course keep in mind that with Death and Final Reckoning, the last 2 Mission Impossible films, them being back-to-back and them being a 2-parter and such, and I do recall, they were originally going to have, parts 1 and 2, in the title, but, it turned out fine with it not being in it, and on account of, the final Mission Impossible film. But, yeah, I mean, with what Death Reckoning left off, just, oh my gosh, but that wasn't enough, because more to come in the final installment, and golly, because where we last left off in the second to last film, and thus in this, because it comes down to this entity, and with the key and the whole thing of a submarine that crashed, and was lost forever in 2012, and where our characters stand, those that, are a part of the IMF, and they're under the leadership of Hunt, and just, yeah, them having to deal with the biggest, impossible mission, and how it's done. Out of all of the past missions that were impossible, this is the biggest, where they're dealing with this AI, again, which being called the Entity. But not only that, dealing with someone that Ethan knew years ago, and he's a big threat, and with his connections with the Entity, and I'm of course talking about Gabriel. Yeah. And with the unfortunate loss of one of the IMF members under the leadership of Ethan, with what happened in the last one, But yeah, I mean, where the Final Reckoning picks up, and where the suspension is, and, it's now or never, they are running out of time, and it's a race against to, track down the submarine, and on account of how to take down the Entity with certain devices and all that, and which, by the way, one of the IMF members under Ethan's leadership does supervise in order to take down the Entity. And with those, of course, that don't think Ethan can do this, but of course he can, because he's Ethan Hunt. I mean, Ethan would just do whatever it takes, even down to his last breath, you know what I'm saying? Just that kind of stuff. But man, I tell ya, because just watching this movie and with what it had to offer, amazing, extraordinarily well done. And of course, with Christopher McQuarrie having directed this, and this being his last Mission Impossible film, of course, to direct, yeah, just there are no more words to describe how perfect this ends off the film series, and just, yeah, and obviously just mind-blowing. And surprisingly, I made sure not to see any clips and all that would, obviously make their way on social media, like most prominently on YouTube. I surprisingly had avoided that. I think maybe just like one or two bits I've seen, probably like, well, of course I've seen the trailers, but, but nothing really, not that much. To sit down and watch this film all the way through from beginning to end, again, it just didn't disappoint. Everything that The Final Reckoning, the final installment of the Mission Impossible film series, has in stored, it was excellent. Yeah. All right. So with the first things I've had to say about The Final Reckoning done / out of the way, now, as always, for me, read the description / the story. Hunt and the IMF pursue a dangerous AI, which being called the Entity, as I said, that's infiltrated global intelligence. With governments and a figure from his past in pursuit, Hunt races to stop it from forever changing the world. Yeah, and also ultimate destruction. That being another biggie. Alright, so, with reading the description / the story done, out of the way, now, of course, break down / dive in the film itself. Shall we? Well, the film taking place not long after what happened in the last installment, 2 months after receiving the key. Yep. Luckily, Ethan managed to get his hands on the key fully, managing to escape Gabriel. In the last film, the whole thing with the train, that was the climax. Yep. And where Ethan was going to go to next, and for now, remain hidden, of course. Well, the key, which being the source code for the Malevolent Artificial Intelligence, Malevolent, sometimes if I butchered a little, which being, of course, known as the Entity, as I said before. And rogue IMF agent, which of course being Ethan Hunt, once again, Tom Cruise, he would receive a message from the U.S. president, which being, of course, Erica Salone. Yeah, and Erica, once again, being played by the lovely, talented Angela Bassett. And she would inform Ethan that the Entity would continue to seize control of global nuclear systems. Yikes. And aided by the undercover Doomsday Cultists. Yeah, I hope I said that right. And the Entity has the ability to reshape all digital information and therapy distorting truth itself, turning allies against each other and toying with their minds and all that. Yeah, that's another thing. And would increase the risk of a global nuclear conflict. Man, the world is at stake because of this very intelligent AI, And Erica says that, the existence of the world depends on finding the source code to the Entity. And, Gabriel, whom was the Entity's Isison, if I hope I said that right. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. In the physical world, Paris was Gabriel's accomplice, and he is he's in Austrian custody. Yeah, and also, this was a really cool moment, and not to mention that, yeah, at times throughout this movie, there are callbacks of the entirety of the Mission Impossible franchise. Yeah, especially right here, where the president mentions about what Ethan has done for all these years, and we see clips, montage clips and all that, flashbacks to, a lot of things that have happened in the past Mission Impossible films, some old familiar faces that we had seen throughout the Mission Impossible franchise, like Anthony Hopkins, the late Philip Seymour Hoffman, the list goes on. And those that knew Ethan and that worked alongside with him, but most of them, not all of them, they sadly lost their lives in the line of duty working alongside with Ethan. Yeah. And, Ethan, on the other hand, refuses to give in the key to his government, as anyone, just anybody, could, by any chance, use it for their own selfish ends. That is bound to happen, because you just never know. And Ethan has a good feeling, of course, not to underestimate Ethan. And Ethan, well, he definitely wants to kill the entity. Yeah, definitely. However, Erica says that this would wipe out the whole cyberspace and plugging the world into an endless war. Yeah. And then Ethan would then be ordered to surrender the key by President Erica, but yeah, he just, screw it, I'm not doing it, and he would would continue pursuing Gabriel, because yeah, his next target is Gabriel. Yeah, he wants to take down Gabriel. The entity's former proxy. That's another way to put it. Yeah, Gabriel being the entity's former proxy. And whom has forsaken after failing the steel key himself. Yeah. Because after what Gabriel went through at the very end of the last film, losing the key, yeah. And then Ethan and his fellow IMF agent, Benji, they would reunite, and they would first visit their ill IMF hacker, Luther Stickle. And yeah, Benji, of course, once again being Simon Pegg, and Luther, Vin Rams. Yeah. In his off-grid lab beneath London. Yeah, because they're currently now in London, and where Luther has finished developing the poison pill malware that can target the entity. Like, this is one of the tickets to take down the entity once and for all, with what Luther has made. And the team would then recruit Jasper Briggs, played by Shay Wyman, yeah, if I said that right, whom is a U.S. intelligence agent assigned to track down Ethan and his team. And there's also his partner, Briggs's partner, Theo Degas. Yeah, I'm just going to stick with Theo, being played by Greg Tarzan Davis. Yeah, and Gabriel's former lieutenant, which being Paris, whom, yeah, we saw in the last film, and where Ethan, spared her life. And of course, yeah, Palm Clementeff, once again playing Paris, aka Mantis. And whom would tell them where Gabriel is? She knows where Gabriel is, and Gabriel, whom had tried to kill Paris, as we saw, because yeah, getting some flashbacks and callbacks, flashbacks/callbacks to the last Mission Impossible film, and where Gabriel tried to kill Paris. And as he was sure that, of course, that she would betray them, and as Ethan has spared her life, as I also mentioned. And with this turned her against Gabriel, with what has happened, yeah, Ethan does convince Degas and Theo, I said I was going to stick with Theo, convincing Theo and Paris that the entity wants them divided and fighting each other. Yeah, toying with their minds, as I said. And so that it can operate with impunity. Yeah, I said that right. So, luckily, in the end, yeah, managing to convince both Theo and Paris to just put the guns down and to, yeah, join Ethan and Benji and so on. Yeah. And good thing they do. And I gotta say, Theo himself, he was a good addition to Ethan's IMF team. And even though, yeah, this being the last Mission Impossible film, and with how much we get of Theo, well, still, Theo, he was good. With what Greg Tarzan Davis brings to Theo, was excellent. He did a good job. Well, then, after convincing, again, Theo and Paris, the team would then attend a party where Gabriel is expected to attend. Ethan knows that he'll be there. And Grace would then meet with Ethan at the party, and Grace, of course, once again being played by Agent Carter herself, Haley Atwell. And she would tell Ethan that Kittredge has ordered Grace to betray Ethan, because, yeah, with Grace being brought in by Kittredge and all that, and, where she is now, and reuniting with Ethan, yeah. in London still, yeah, Gabriel's men would capture Ethan and Grace, and Gabriel, showing up, and would force Ethan to recover the Podkova. Yeah. The Podkova module developed from the Rabbit's Foot. Remember the Rabbit's Foot from one of the past Mission Impossible films? That was interesting, the direction that this film took, and a callback to one of those things that Ethan retrieved and all that, the Rabbit's Foot. Interesting. Yeah, the Rabbit's Foot, in the sunken Russian submarine, Sevastopol. Yep, is that submarine and all that, that crashed in 2012? Yeah. And which would give him control over the entity in exchange for Grace, sparing her life and all that. And then Ethan would summarize correctly that the entity had cut Gabriel loose after he lost the key, cut ties and all that. But, well, Gabriel has other plans to do with the entity. And, the submarine, more mentions of the submarine, which being undetectable at any known sonar. And the Podkova was the secret to it's invincibility. A counter associates algorithmic I gotta slow down, drive in 2012, and the Russians, having discovered the computer virus of unknown origin, which spreading through their Black Sea fleet. Yeah. And of course, yeah, like what we saw in the last Mission Impossible film, and yeah, we would see more of that when the submarine crashed and such. Yeah. And the mysterious virus, which intended to sabotage the Podkova and rendering the submarine detectable. Yeah. The virus instead tricked the crew into sinking themselves. Yeah, because that one missile, and then it then struck their submarine, it turned around. Oh, yeah. And also, yeah, the entity's source code was, in fact, inside the Podkova, and which was now sitting at the bottom of the ocean. And the Podkova's housing being designed to self-destruct if tampered with. If anybody touched it or anything like that, a single finger. Yeah, exactly. And the only way to open it, well, is with that key that Ethan has. And Gabriel would then reveal more about the Rabbit's Foot, that the Rabbit's Foot was the malicious code of the entity. Little did Ethan realize, well, us, the audience, most prominently. And if Ethan had not stolen the Rabbit's Foot, there would be no entity. The entity would have not been born. And that means that technically Ethan and everybody else would not be in the position that they're at right now, and on account of the last film, you get my point. Those complicated details. And another thing is that if Ethan does not stop that entity in only 3 days, well, the entity, what it's going to do, it will intitulate a global nuclear strike, and it will end humanity as we know it, as I kind of said earlier, because, yeah, not good. Not good. Just, yeah, the direction this final Mission Impossible film is taking, what the entity is doing, more to the entity that we discover. Holy crap. I tell ya. Anyways, so Ethan and Grace, they would manage to escape, but of course, yeah, Gabriel getting away, and not to mention that Ethan, he had like a tooth or something, and if he chewed on it, then he would kill himself, and he does bite on it, and it's obvious that, yeah, Ethan, he's up to something, and he manages to fool Gabriel and the others. Even Grace for a moment, but nope. When the medic came in to try to revive him, nope, it was all a trick. And when I watched the film, I was like, he tricked them. I'm sure you probably reacted the same way. And yeah, the fights between Ethan and those guys and Grace trying to untangle herself, cut to, unlock the cuffs and all that. And even when Gabriel orders one of his guys to kill Grace, but not kill Ethan, he does not want Ethan harmed or killed in any way. And Ethan just, blocking Grace, and, the guy trying to shoot Grace. And ultimately, because, with Grace getting freed and trying to take on the guys as well, then when it comes to Ethan, well, off camera, and we can see Grace's reaction that, jeez, Ethan is literally beating their asses hard. Yeah, because the aftermath, he's got blood on him, and, well, because, they were gonna kill her. Too dangerous to let them go, because they would have killed her. And, yeah, because Ethan making it very clear to Grace that he wouldn't let anything harm her. Yeah, because with how much he cares about his fellow agents. That's the thing. Yeah, we've seen this before. And literally up to 23 minutes into the film, we finally get the opening credits. I was almost wondering, oh, are we not getting that? Nope, we do, because it wouldn't have been the same if they left that out, right? Because, yeah, with the Mission Impossible theme playing and the roll call of our main cast members for the final film, nice, yeah. All right, so, again, they would escape, and so would Gabriel. He gets away. And, yeah, by contacting the entity, which, being in a digital virtual reality box and stored in Gabriel's lair, well, Ethan would then be shown visions of a nuclear apocalypse. Yeah. And apparently, because he was told that if he would put that mask on and get inside there, he would not be the same. But he had to, because, he had to know. And the entity would say says to Ethan that Luther will die and demand access to a digital bunker in South Africa to survive. And the entity also said that it offers hope for the future, and the few humans who survive would emerge stronger. And if Ethan does not help the entity to survive, then the world, it will still come to an end in 3 days. Again, only 3 days remaining. And Ethan, because after he knew everything, because, it took him a few moments to, just recuperate from that, because they were not kidding, because he would not, he would not be, well, I mean, he's still Ethan, but just, some crazy effed up shit that he just saw. Yeah, I don't blame him. Well, then Ethan would task his team with getting the Sevastopol's coordinates, and also by retrieving him after the dive. Those basic details that need to happen and they should know. And then he would race to save Luthor. However, Gabriel did, of course, steal the poison pill and would trap Luthor with a timed nuclear bomb. I think, because it's obvious, where this is going, and, not good. Well, Luthor, what would happen next? And Ethan, just, racing through London to locate and get to Luthor. Well, he knows where Luthor is, but by the time they get there, well, I mean, they're both calm, and with them talking and such, and with, what Luthor's dealing with, because he's trying to, deactivate part of the bomb and such. And what would happen next? Luthor, he would ultimately sacrifice himself and, remove one of the detonators to convert it from a nuclear explosion to a conventional explosion to minimize the blast. Just not be a huge blast, say, that could take down London. And, well, because sadly, and I think it was obvious, okay, if Rebecca Ferguson having died in the second-to-last Mission Impossible film wasn't enough, then the biggest one, besides her, being Vin Rhames as Luthor. Ugh. Oh, man. I have no doubt, of course, for the Mission Impossible fans, tear-jerking to lose a great character like Luthor. No doubt about it. Yeah. But let's face it. Even Luthor said to Ethan, what would we have done, in retirement, fishing and all that? Just, sure, he would have loved it, but Luther explaining to Ethan that he was born to do this, and where he's at now, and he died like a hero. And yeah, and well, of course, it would be up to Ethan to continue what Luther started by taking down part of, like, say, those bombs and all that. Like, it wasn't enough because Ethan's got to do the rest, along with the rest of the team. Well, and after that, because, yeah, then Gabriel, still needing Ethan to be alive, and, and Luther having been now dead, and, as only Luther could create the poison pill. Yeah, because Luther being the only one that could do something like that, and, yeah, the ray of hope to take down that entity soon. Let's hope so. Well, afterwards, Ethan just dramatized by what has happened, and then he would be brought into the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center. He turns himself in, and Briggs believed that Ethan, and I didn't quite realize this, and I'm sure you didn't either. Briggs turns out to be the son of Jim Phelps, Jon Voight's character in the first Mission Impossible film. Interesting. That's an interesting connection there. And apparently, because we learned that Briggs was only 7 when his father died. That year, 96. Really? Because I don't think so. Because I think, if anything, could he? Like, I mean, how old is, like, the movie doesn't establish how old Briggs is, but I'm sure as though, but I don't know, just, yeah, you can let me know in the comment section, but anyways, back on point, because, yeah, Briggs would talk with Ethan, believing that Hunt framed his father, Jim, as a traitor in the, Prague, if I think I butchered that name, you know what I'm saying, and yeah, because, more callbacks to past events in the Mission Impossible film, and what happened in 96, the same, like, the year that the first Mission Impossible film took place, and that first mission we saw Ethan in, and where a lot of his fellow agents had died. Like, yeah, call back to that. Interesting. And yeah, and with 3 days until the entity takes over the remaining nuclear weapons control facilities and launches nuclear Armageddon, well, Ethan tries to convince Salone that she's got to let him go and let him locate the submarine. And against CIA Director Eugene Kittred's objections, yeah, and of course, Kittred, once again, being in the final Mission Impossible film, as we saw him in the second to last. And yeah, Kittredge once again being played by Henry Czerny. Yeah, and still the same Kittredge and how he feels towards Ethan, of course. Well, the Madam President herself would say that the nations who have control over their arsenals, including U.S. and Russia, are already contemplating a primitive strike before they lose control of it. As such, well, all treaty alliances are null and void. And then, what would happen next? And coming back to Ethan's fellow IMF agents, Grace, Benji, Paris, and Theo. They would travel to the St. Matthew Island in the Bering Sea, home to a Cold War-era naval sonar array to basically that detected the submarine's sinking in 2012. Yeah, they gotta locate the submarine, even though it's off the charts. They'll find a way, of course. And without knowing the significance of the event, yeah, that's another thing too. And while they're there, they would meet with former CIA analyst William Donlow. Yeah, I think I got his last name right. Once again being played by Rolf Saxon. Yeah, the guy whom, retrieved Ethan's knife in the first Mission Impossible film. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's amazing that he came back. And the fact that this guy, William, he by this point, and as he makes his way into where he is in this film, he would play a big part in this film and being a really big helping hand to Ethan and the rest of the IMF agents. Good for him. I love that they brought him back, and where he been after all these years? Like, well, yeah, because it would be explained that William was exiled to the island after Ethan's 1996 break-in at the CIA headquarters. Because not long after that, that's when he would get transported, and from there on, you know, after, say, 96 and up to where we are now in the events of this film, this is where he's been. Golly. You know, the fact that this guy had missed out so much what Ethan and the others had been doing. I tell ya. And the Russian Special Forces, being led by Captain Kolstov, being played by Pasha D. Linkov, also reached the island for the coordinates. Oh, and by the way, to mention a little more about, say, Pasha D. Linshenkov, I hope I might be butchering his last name some, but you know who it is, of course, again. Feel like mentioning this. I of course, he's done a lot of great stuff as an actor, and I most prominently remember him best as one of the Russian soldiers in the fourth Indiana Jones movie, and one of the Russian astronauts, the only Russian astronaut that joined alongside with Wolowitz in The Big Bang Theory, in those episodes where Howard is in space. And of course, him and his Russian accent calling him, hey, Fruit Loops. So great. And by the way, to mention the other characters that, are in the final Mission Impossible film, some that we had seen in the second to last, Theo, because, I completely forgot that he was in the second to last Mission Impossible film, Dead Reckoning. But just to elaborate, with Theo and how much more we get of him in Final Reckoning, where he really shines, joining with Ethan and the others, it's great to see, because again, Greg Tarzan Davis, with what more he brings to Theo in the final installment, he's really good. Okay. And also, Mark Gatiss, once again being in this, as Angstrom, and Richards, being played by Charles Parnell. There's also General Sidney, being played by another good talent, Nick Offerman. Yeah, we love good old Nick Offerman. Serling, being played by Halt McCallany. I think I'm butchering his last name some, but you know me sometimes, and you know who I'm talking about. Yep, and there's also Walters, played by Janek McTeer, and these guys that, we see a lot when, we come to the Madam President herself. Or anyways, okay, but and also we are introduced to William's wife, whom, when he was transported and all that, he would find true love, and he would get married and such, and that being Tepisa, being played by Lucy Tulagarchuk, if I think I'm probably butchering, but again, me sometimes. And with how much we get of William's wife in this, well, she's good too, and also is a good helping hand right next to her hubby with the IMF agents. Yeah, good for her. For both of them, that is. Okay, but to get back on point, because, what would happen next, and to speed things up some, them being captured by the Russian Special Forces, and also seeking the coordinates. Well, at one point, William's wife would go to feed the dogs, the dogs that, they mush, the sled dogs. And Grace, opens to join with William's wife to feed the dogs. And they allow this because, attend to the dogs that, it's dinner time. And, of course, they have a plan on escaping and such. The others, Theo, Paris, Benji, and William, they would do whatever it takes to try to take down and fight off the other soldiers. And, also, William, coincidentally, memorized the submarine's coordinates, and he would transmit the coordinates to Ethan. So he's got to coordinate. He's got to transmit those coordinates to Ethan and such. Because with Ethan trying to make his way to the submarine. And as for Ethan, well, he would join the aircraft carrier, the USS George H.W. Bush, in the North Pacific Ocean, and would later board the submarine, the USS Ohio, yeah. And the captain of the submarine, Captain Jack Bledsoe, I hope I'm saying that right, yeah, being played by Tarmel Tillman, yeah. And with how much we get of Captain Jack in this, yeah, he was good, and yeah, like, Ethan's in good hands with these submarine crew members, and under the command of Captain Jack. That's another Captain Jack we have, you know, a captain that goes by the name of Jack, because we've got Captain Jack Sparrow. Just need I go on? Anyways, well, the captain would inform Ethan that the Bering Sea is teeming with Russian submarines, and, you know, any mission that in that area would be suicidal. Yeah, taking the risk and all that. But Ethan would order the captain to take the Ohio into the Bering Sea at all costs. Like, yeah, I mean, you know, Ethan's taken quite the risk, but, I mean, you know, he knows what he's doing, yeah. Go into that Bering Sea and to come to the periscope Death to receive the coordinates, yeah. And by the way, because some of those other submarine members, the crew members, I should say, well, because one of them I most prominently know of, that it was nice to see her be a part of this cast. Yeah, because Kodiak, I hope I'm saying her name right, being played by the talented Katie O'Brien. Yep, because most prominently we've seen her in The Mandalorian, and amongst other great stuff she's been in. She's a fantastic actress, for sure. There's also Pills, literally, that's his name, Pills, being played by Stephen O. Young. There's Hager, being played by Thomas Paradis. Shirley, played by Paul Bullion. Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, as I see with how much we get of those characters, you know, on the submarine. And not to mention, before Ethan would meet with the USS Ohio, well, and when he boarded the George W. Bush and all that, yeah, the ship, well, he met with Admiral Neely. And, yeah, Admiral Neely, being played by another good talent in this film, Hannah Waddingham. Yeah, I hope I got her last name right. Yeah, and with how much we get of her as the Admiral, well, she, too, was really good. Okay, but back on point, because, yeah, after receiving the coordinates, thanks to William, little does Ethan realize, well, he would, just like, yeah, and obviously, yeah, Ethan and William are finally going to meet one another and properly be introduced. Yeah, because with what happened in the first Mission Impossible film, they weren't properly introduced. So, yeah, all that they did have, like, interactions was, well, Ethan accidentally dropping the knife. And, yeah, the thing is that William kept that same exact knife after all those years. That's amazing. Oh, yeah, obviously that, you know, the studio and the producers and all that, you know, involved in this movie, like, would, of course, make sure, you know, to have that same exact style, you know, design knife, you know, to be in this movie that William kept. You know what I'm saying? Just like, yeah, that specific designed knife and all that. All right, but yeah, with receiving the coordinates and barely surviving, a doomsday assassin, which being one of the submarine crew members, Hager, yeah, who had infiltrated the Ohio and just, yeah, being a spy, basically. Little did the captain of the submarine realize. And yeah, because a fight going on between Haggard and Ethan, and with the IMF agents trying to take down the Russian soldiers. Both of those fights going at the same time, back to back. But of course, luckily, all of them managed to get out of there. And Katie O'Brien, her character, managing to take down Hager. Good for her. Well, Ethan would use an experimental diving suit to reach the submarine and retrieve the Podkova as, well, the wreck slides down the continental shelf, yeah, you know, underwater. And Ethan also had to have a VHF transmitter on his body that allowed his team to track his exact location, where he is, under the ice, and yeah, they would retrieve him and save him. And yeah, that whole sequence where he's going through the submarine in that specially designed experimental diving suit, which, by the way, that was apparently Katie O'Brien's character's suit, and, you know, the last thing she said to Ethan, you know, take care of my suit, which, you know, was amusing. But, of course, she would know the fact, right, that there's probably a good chance that there would be nothing left of that suit. And there isn't. Yeah, but that sequence, I don't know, because when I was watching the film, I felt there was a part of me that was like, yeah, this is kind of going on too long. But I did not want to go in that direction because, of course, I understand clearly what was going on. And it was very important. You know, that kind of stuff. But, I mean, yeah, accompanied with the music. I mean, yeah, because the music and score, which I have to mention, in the final Mission Impossible film, fantastic. Yep. Once again, good old Michael Giacchino. Never disappoints. Yeah, that, where he's going through the submarine, and more flashbacks we would get on what happened to those crew members of that submarine. And not to mention that their bodies are still intact. It's like, they're frozen in time, and even, like, Ethan's a bit shocked. Like, one of them's, like, pointing, like, good golly, that is a terrifying sight to see. Yeah, and just how slowly the submarine is going down, and Ethan just attempting to go through it and locate the exact place where, you know, to retrieve the Podkova. Yeah. By the way, the room that has the Podkova, you know, to me, because, even if I establish this, I don't, maybe, like, in my review of Dead Reckoning, because, point being is that, to me, and I think it occurred to me as of now when I watched the film, Final Reckoning, where the interior where the Podkova is kind of reminds me just a little bit of the TARDIS interior. Because, you know, you got the main front center console, you got the round things, as the Doctor calls them. I don't know, I guess that's just me, but if you feel the same way too, by any chance, let me know. Because, you know, even if, like, as I'm now bringing this up, you'll probably be like, oh yeah, you know, it kind of almost does. Anyways. And by the way, I can't forget to mention this too. At times in this movie, and where they're going through the plans and details on what to do next, well, we would see some shots that basically show what is technically supposed to happen, you know, stuff like that, how it can look. Yeah, that kind of, yeah, that's really cool with what was done in this movie. You know what I'm talking about, I hope. Anyways, well, then afterwards, and narrowly escaping without his diving suit, because like I said, because unfortunately that diving suit, what were the chances of anything, of that entire diving suit surviving? Yeah, because Ethan having to strip off the scuba diving suit bit by bit, yeah, as the only exit was through a torpedo tube, and it was too small for him on account of that full gear he was wearing. And yeah, just he had to strip off that suit. And, well, Ethan would then be revived from a decompression sickness by Grace. Yeah, because interesting shot where, you know, Ethan is trapped underwater where the ice is, and we see Grace underwater, but then we really see, because, yeah, Ethan made it out of the freezing cold water, being revived by Grace, and Grace staying by Ethan's side until he would officially regain consciousness and so on. That was good for her, yeah. And yeah, and also using a portable decompression chamber that, yeah, reuniting with his team. So again, I like that, you know, because how much, by this point, Grace has come to care and love for Ethan. Nice to see. Yeah, and also, yeah, William's wife also being there to help out Grace to revive Ethan. And there was a funny, nice moment between William's wife and Grace, and on account of, like, you know, the dog sled, and William's wife having to describe Grace, like, you know, to mush, you know, whoa, and the mentioning of looking out for polar bears and using a rifle. That was a nice humorous moment there. And just with Grace trying to understand what she's saying. Yeah. Anyways, so afterwards, and yeah, the team's reunited. And not to mention that, yeah, by this point, William and Ethan have finally met one another, properly introduced, etc. Yeah. Well, Ethan would plan to plug the poison pill into the Podkova, fooling the entity into entering a physical optical 5D drive. Interesting. Which, of course, having been built by the late Luthor. And instead of the bunker mainframe in South Africa, Benji would then explain that as soon as the entity believes that it has entered the mainframe, it will launch the nuclear attack. And remove the drive too soon, well, the entity will not be completely removed, and removed too late, it will launch the attack. The gap with 100 milliseconds. In 100 milliseconds, yeah. Those complicated details that they go through. And at the bunker, well, Gabriel would ambush the team with a timed nuclear device. Also, can't forget to mention with what they were talking about in order to take down the entity and to unplug and all that, they also mention with the blink of an eye. Yeah, that. Of course, I had to mention that too. Okay, but as I said, at the bunker, because Gabriel being there at the bunker and ambushing the team with a timed nuclear device and demanding the Podkova, and Gabriel believing that if he destroys the underground mainframe, well, the entity would not launch, as that would mean that the entity would have to kill itself to destroy the world. And Kittredge would show up, interrupt the whole thing, and seeking control of the entity. Figures. Like, golly, can't Kittredge get a grip? Apparently not. And then, during a gunfight, well, the bomb would activate, and Benji, if you blink for a second, you might miss it, but luckily I didn't, and I'm sure most of you didn't either. He does get shot. Not like at the chest, like somewhere around here, in this direction of his body. And Gabriel would flee with the poison pill, and would be pursued by Ethan, and when, Benji told Ethan to go get Gabriel, because, Benji didn't want to have Ethan know that he had been wounded, because then Ethan would have never left. But luckily, of course, Grace and Paris, they're there to help out Benji later on. And to help supervise Benji with what has to be done, and Benji having to guide them, which we're going to get to momentarily. Again, with Ethan pursuing Gabriel with the Podkova, well, William, his wife, and Theo, they would attempt to defuse the bomb, while Paris, Grace, and Benji prepare the mainframe to trap the entity. Then, what would happen next? Salone would avoid a primitive nuclear strike on nations who had lost control of their nuclear arsenal of the entity. To the entity and all that. And where they're at by this point. And as that would prevent the entity from using their arsenals after it is safeguarded itself. However, the chairman of the Joint Chefs, which, again, being Nick Offerman, his character, would fatally be wounded protecting her from a doomsday assassin. Another doomsday assassin is there. Wow. I don't think that really crossed my mind until, well, now bring it up, and I looked at it right here. Anyways, but he went out like a hero, saving the Madam President's life. Also, it was mentioned early on about the Madam President's son, because, the mentioning of her son would be brought up by Walters, because, how is the Madam President herself going to explain this to her son, as Walter asks her about this and all that? Just like, well, do you think that she would really just flat out tell her son about what's at stake and all that? Not to mention, he's serving the country. Her son is serving the country. And, I was wondering, and we're going to later in this movie, towards the end, obviously, see the Madam President's son, Erica. I gotta keep that in mind still, Erica. And, all right. And also, it's nice to see that her son is credited as Erica's son. Anyways, but until I mention him, we're gonna get there. Well, after that, as I just mentioned, with Erica, the Madam President, almost being assassinated by, a spy, aka a doomsday assassin. But good for Nick Offerman's character to take the bullet shot and to, save her life. And the last dying words from him are, "Madam President," and he dies. It's emotional, even for her. Well, coming back to Ethan, because he would still be in pursuit, chasing down Gabriel in a biplane. Yeah, biplane. And yeah, there are two biplanes that we see. The one that, Gabriel is driving in is, driving/flying, is a yellow one. And, one of his men who follows him behind is flying in a red biplane. Yeah. And yeah, because we all knew, and knowing that, okay, obviously, when it's come to the Mission Impossible films, Tom Cruise doing the most insane stunt performances ever. So I think it was obvious that, well, by the very last Mission Impossible film, clearly Tom Cruise was going to do a bigger, insane stunt. And he for sure does. He does so, definitely. With the biplanes, holding on to the biplanes, like, oh my gosh, like, Tom Cruise just, he wouldn't have it in him doing these crazy stunts. He's definitely a top master of not only being a fantastic actor, but doing crazy shit stunts. Pardon my French, but it's true. Well, so with the whole sequence of the biplane, because, between that going on with, Gabriel and Ethan on the biplanes, and with what's going on with, Paris, Grace, and Benji trying to trap/capture the entity, and with William, his wife, and Theo trying to disfuse and all that, well, talking more about Ethan and with the whole biplane stuff, Ethan would grab a hold to the red biplane, climbing onto it, and taking down, the last henchman of Gabriel's. Now, Gabriel's, just one. And then he would catch up to Gabriel's biplane, even after, Ethan got into the cockpit of the red biplane, trying to chase down Gabriel, and Gabriel trying to take down Ethan in the red biplane, damaging part of the tail, and Ethan still trying to, get a grip of it, and when a part of the biplane is broken, it's loose, and with him climbing onto Gabriel's plane, and luckily he managed to grab a hold of the yellow biplane that Gabriel was piloting, and the red biplane just falling down, crashing. We don't see an explosion, even if they wanted to show it. He would break Gabriel's arm. When he gets a hold of Gabriel, punching him and all that, at one point he breaks Gabriel's arm. I had a feeling that's probably what he did, because, Gabriel letting out a gut-wrenching scream because on account of his arm. And, luckily Ethan would retrieve the poison pill. And Gabriel, well, with him trying to escape, and, still trying to take down, Ethan, well, unfortunately, he doesn't, of course not. He does get himself killed after hitting his forehead on the plane's rudder. And after making a reckless attempt to escape, when he said to Ethan that only one of us has a parachute, well, he didn't do it on time, and how he let go of the biplane, because when he hit the rudder, you see that blood, he's done for. Sayonara, Gabriel, you asshole. God, how evil that character was. But, with, what's-him-face who plays Gabriel, as I said, fantastic. Pulling off a fantastic evil performance. The final villain, main antagonist, in the last two Mission Impossible films, without a doubt. And it's not just Gabriel whom is the main antagonist, the Entity as well. Because again, the Entity being AI, and this specific AI having a really big mind of its own. Well, after Gabriel is done for, Ethan would then find another parachute, luckily. I guess Gabriel missed that one. By, putting on the parachute, and would finally insert the poison pill into the Podkova mid-air and allowing Grace to trap the Entity just before the nuclear launch. Because by this point, everything's we're all up on the edge of our seats. The way the music's playing, the suspensefulness, and cutting back to each of these characters. And not to mention that Benji, he's losing a lot of blood, and, Grace and Paris, they're trying their best to get him to snap out of it and wake up, just as he's kind of, But rest assured that at the end of the film, Benji is alive and well. That's good to know. Because, yeah, we lost Luther. We weren't risking to lose another one of these characters, especially Benji, and in the case of Ethan, because it kind of seems like it. But what would happen next? Yeah, because luckily, the entity is captured. The power does go off worldwide, but then a few seconds later, it comes back on. And Ethan, because he was falling to the ground, not having unleashed the parachute yet, well, he did, because Ethan did survive the fall. And yeah, thankfully, he managed to activate the parachute just in time. Well, once he's on the ground, Ethan would then listen to a farewell message straight from Luther that was in the poison pill, which then would self-destruct. Of course, when it's come to the Mission Impossible films, every message that is left always has to have a self-destruct. And yeah, just like Luther going on about, like, say, you know, obviously that this message that Luther left, well, that meant that Ethan had succeeded, and, you know, life going on and such, and, you know, this speech that Vin Rams as Luther gives about life and all that is well done. A really good speech. And as this speech goes on, we see what the characters do next, and the Madam President herself reuniting with her son. That's great to see. Yeah. And yeah, the Madam President, Erica, her son, being played by Kwabena Ensah, if I got his full name right, but you know me sometimes still. But yeah, nice to see, because a nice reunion between her and her son. Yeah. Then afterwards, well, coming back to Ethan, well, and after, yeah, the recorded message that Luther left off on the poison pill, and yeah, self-destruct, well, Ethan would then give the destroyed Podkova to Kittredge, and Briggs, whom is there with Kittredge, he would make amends with Ethan, because yeah, with how Briggs first felt about Ethan, and with, you know, Ethan exposing his late father for being a traitor, it's all good now. They're on good terms, they shake hands, and all that. That's good to see, yeah. And then, the final scene we would get, well, a reunion in London, because, yeah, Theo, Paris, Benji, having recovered from his injuries, good to see, and as I mentioned, and Grace, they would reunite with Ethan. They're all there in London, and Grace would give Ethan the drive with the entity trapped in its own prison, you know, and, well, the IMF team would then part ways. Yeah. But I'd like to think that probably they would get together, I guess. You know, besides, like, I wouldn't want to think that this is a official goodbye for all of them. Like, they're not going to see one another again. I don't know, because, like, if you know what I'm saying, just, like, that's what I would like to think. And besides, like, you know, the relationship that has come a long way for Grace and Ethan, you know, even from, like, the second to last film up to this, you know, but, you know, we're left to think that probably, and what I'm thinking, just, yeah, but, man, what a hell of a way for the last film to go off, because so much intenseful stuff happening, but in the very end, it was all taken care of. They all became heroes, most prominently Ethan, managing to take down the biggest threat, the biggest mission that was impossible, but they succeeded. Yeah. From Gabriel to the entity himself, this AI, I tell ya. Yeah. And yeah, that's our final Mission Impossible film. Wow. Yeah. And as I said early on, holy shit. Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, the final installment of the Mission Impossible films. What a way for this film series to go out perfectly. Everything that Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning had to offer, with its final adventure, with what the mission was happening, what the mission was like, being impossible at first, and how it did start in the second to last film, and we get more of it in the final installment. Yeah. You know, the great cast of talents, you know, with what they had to deliver in the final installment. A few more returning faces, most prominently William himself. Yeah, because, you know, the first time we saw him was in the very first Mission Impossible film, and what a great way for him to return in the final installment and being a great helping hand. Yeah, He deserved it. Good for him. Yeah. The callbacks to the past events of the Mission Impossible films, the Rabbit's Foot having connection with, the submarine and all that, and with the Entity, pretty interesting. Some humorous and funny moments here and there, the hard-hitting moments, the drama, the suspense, the emotional stuff, and the big sacrifice that happened with Luthor, and when it seemed like maybe any of these characters would have died. Well, yeah, like Nick Offerman's character also died, and a few others, but yeah. But especially like when it came to the main characters themselves, from Grace, Paris, Benji, Ethan, well, luckily, none of them died. Yeah, they lived, and when they took down Gabriel and the Entity itself. The action, the suspense, the effects, the visual effects, and when it came to the Entity, really well done. And the practical effects that happen, and with, the crazy stunt performance by Cruise himself on those biplanes, excellent. He pulled it off yet again in the final installment. The music and score, fantastic too. Christopher McQuarrie's direction for the final Mission Impossible film. Just everything going on in The Final Reckoning did not disappoint from beginning to end. It went out with a bang. This being the final installment, need I go on? All of the above, for sure. And I'm giving Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning, well, is it obvious? 10 out of 10 stars. Yes, 10 out of 10 stars for Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning. And what about you guys? What did you think of the final installment in the Mission Impossible film franchise, The Final Reckoning? And of course, for any of you that have followed and had been fans of the film series, and up to the final film, did it not disappoint you either? I have no doubt it didn't. For those of you that experienced it in theaters, or later seeing it on DVD, Blu-ray, streaming, that goes for me. Yeah. Favorite moments to come from this, what you didn't expect, you were just getting into the suspenseful stuff, you were up at the edge of your seats, and, how'd you feel about the loss of Luthor, and when you thought one of these other characters was gonna die, what you thought of the climax, and everything else going on, just, need I go on? And if this would be one of your top favorite films in the Mission Impossible film franchise. Yeah, the film series, all that, yeah. But just, again, need I go on? Overall, what do you think of The Final Reckoning itself? The last in the Mission Impossible film series, for now. And with all I've had to say, my review, and what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And with all that being said, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I will see you guys in the next video / review. And stay tuned, because what I will be reviewing next, well, coincidentally, what I'm reviewing next came out literally the same day when The Final Reckoning came out, and one of The Final Reckoning's cast members happens to be in what I'm reviewing next, and that being Hannah Waddingham. Yeah, because also, big coincidence, 2 films that Tom Cruise was in, both of them that he was in came out. They both came out the same day when the animated film and the remake of the animated film came out. And let's just say, what I'm reviewing next, and if you figured it out by now, the live-action remake of, everyone, centering on everyone's favorite experiment, which being 626. Just, again, stay tuned for that. Take care, and until the next Mission Impossible film, and, we'll see. Peace out.